You've probably never thought about where your steel is cut before you get it. Okay, but somebody has to cut it. And I want to tell you about why the bandsaw is generally what is cutting it and what industries you're going to find it in. Okay, my name is Jeremy with I Machine Services. I have over 20 years servicing bandsaws. Okay, before we get into the video, I would like to ask you to maybe potentially comment. If you have any ideas for videos, we'd love to hear what you have so I can make these videos in the future. We're currently in the Bandsaw 101 series so that you can learn all the basics about bandsawing. Okay, so number one, bandsaws are everywhere and you don't necessarily know it. Most metal shops have a bandsaw of some kind. Okay, it is one of the most common things. Generally, anytime you get material off the truck, one of the first steps it has to be go through is cut down with a bandsaw before it's welded, punched, fabricated, painted, machined, all that kind of stuff. It usually has to be done. And a lot of times, before you get it on the truck, it's been cut with a bandsaw. So if you're getting a 40-foot piece, they might cut it in half to 20-foot pieces so that you can actually handle it. Okay. So we're going to go over each shop and what we have and why the bandsaw is in each of these shops. Okay. The first shop that we have is the fabrication shop. Okay. This is going to be a place that contracts to get different fabricating jobs. You're going to have a lot of welders on site. You're going to have a lot of potentially going to have maybe painters. They're going to have punch machines, just a lot of different machines to work metal so they can put all this stuff kind of together. Okay. What happens in fabricating shops is they will have a bandsaw or bandsaws, and everybody gets to use that bandsaw. So, this guy needs it, he'll come over, use it. This guy uses it, he comes over, use it. You don't necessarily get a lot of production cutting in the sense that you have the same thing all the time, every day or every week, consistently, because it kind of really flows with the jobs. So we're not necessarily going to get that. Because of that, we generally don't have a lot of ownership of the machine. The machine is usually quite dirty from the environment, as well as the fact that you don't have anyone that is taking ownership of the machine. Okay, so that's something we normally see in fabrication shops. Manufacturing shops are a little bit different than fabricating shops. Manufacturing shops do a lot of the same things fabricating shops and vice versa. The difference with manufacturing shops is they have their own products that they're making, and they have a line of products, and that's pretty much all they make. So they do have a more consistent workload. So they might be able to cut something for a long period of time because they're going to build 10 of these items and they might build it out. Okay. So a manufacturing shop, again, a lot of similarities. A lot of times you're going to have a lot more ownership. You'll have an actual dedicated saw operator, and then that guy's going to run it. But usually on the manufacturing, different things like that, a lot of times they're cutting a lot more structural steel, like the fabricators, different things like that. Okay. Third place, we have machine shops. Machine shops, I usually like to work in machine shops. One of the reasons is they're usually air conditioned, and I'm down in Houston. So machine shops are a relief compared to all these other places who are basically just a cover from the elements, and then you just get the Houston heat or the just hold this region's heat, the Gulf Coast area. But machine shops, they usually are running mid to smaller machines, and then they're cutting a lot of times a lot more solid material like round bar, different things like that, maybe square stock. And then that's the first step, and then they're going to send it off. Those places, usually one bandsaw will run 5, 10, 15, CNCs that bandsaw can keep up ahead. Okay, so if they don't have a ton of production on their machine shop, or it's not a gigantic machine shop, you usually only have one small bandsaw or medium-sized bandsaw, and then he can usually keep up. You usually have a dedicated operator. Those places are usually cleaner just because the operators and the work environment, they're used to cleaning down their CNC machines. So they respect the machine with that sense. But what happens on those is they like to use compressed air a lot because they see the big boys doing it with their, $250,000, $500,000 CNC machines. And so they want to spray down their machines with the compressed air. I do not recommend spraying your machines down with compressed air on the bandsaws. The reason is you take everything that you see and you make it so that you no longer see it, which then means it goes under covers. It goes in areas that you can't get to. And then when I have to pull your covers off, that's where I'm going to find a bunch of that crap jammed in there. You might have issues with electrical stuff. You might have issues jammed into like seals, bearings, different things like that you don't necessarily want to get. It's going to be rubbing and scraping places you don't want it to rub. I prefer to remove that stuff with shop vacs. I will use compressed airs on very limited specific stuff. But again, you're just pushing all that stuff in places that you can't see. Next one, we have steel service centers. Okay, one of the best ways I describe these to people who do not know the business, these are kind of like the Walmart. Okay, they're going to have a little bit of everything. Okay, you want a little bit of this and this and this. You want some plate. You want an I-beam. You want some round bar. You want some small actions taken to that stuff. They're gonna stock a lot of that stuff or bring that stuff in. So they're kind of the do everything. So these places here, they do usually have dedicated saw operators. A lot of times you might have mid to bigger bandsaws because they're going to have to be able to cut large beams, different things like that, or bundles, different things like that. So a lot of these places are going to do what we call cut in halves. So let's say you have a 40-foot tube or a 40-foot beam or even a 60-foot beam. There are beams 60 foot long. And a lot of shops can't handle something that big. They can only handle 20-footers or smaller. And so they'll request that stuff is cut in half. And so then they'll just do a simple cut in half. It's an easy cut, but you got to line everything up. It takes a lot of crane work. So it just takes time, different things like that. Those machines, those are usually your dustier areas. So again, you got to deal with a lot more dust. So you got to deal with that kind of stuff. Those places in fabrication shops, you got to worry about dirty coolant because your material is usually dirtier. It's got a lot of outside debris on it, different things like that, more rust, different things like that. Next one, we have saw shops. Okay, these are places that their primary focus is to get material out the door in the sense of cut to size. So let's say they'll bring jobs in and all they'll do is cut them. And then so they won't even own the material, as well as they might stock a lot of like small material and cut as needed, kind of like, oh, I need 2 pieces at 2 inches of this type of material of this grade. They might have it in stock and then just cut a couple pieces, put it back, and then send that off. So these saw shops, their saws are usually running more often. They'll usually have a higher concentration of saws. And also on saw shops, a lot of times that's some of the places you'll find the best cutting people, the best operators as far as knowledge on how to cut a wide variety of stuff. They'll usually be able to cut more with less saw. They'll be able to usually cut more material, better cuts, different things like that. These kind of places, when they're run right, they'll know to change the blade out for different types of cuts rather than just making a blade last and then trashing the blade and getting less cuts overall. Okay. Then we have forges. These are places where you got basically big ignits. It's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. And what they're going to do is they're going to have these large chunks of metal. They're usually pretty gross, like as far as the way they look. They're not pretty in any way. They might be ground down, like slag on them, different things like that. I got some places they'll just stick them outside in the mud. And then when they need them, they're usually cutting to weight. Okay, so they don't necessarily care about the quality of cuts on those, but they've got to get, let's say, 3,000 pounds of this material, and they've got a 12,000 pound piece. So they measure out, they do their calculations, they figure, oh, I need 16 inches. Okay, and so they'll cut approximately, maybe cut 17 inches because they don't want it to be under. And then that stuff will go in an oven, it'll go in a press, and they'll forge it together and do what they do. But those places, you're usually going to get a lot of outside debris on the material because, again, this stuff is really big. It's really gross, gigantic. You usually need gigantic forklifts, gigantic cranes to handle this stuff. So these machines are usually some of your larger machines, potentially some of the more beat up because you have big material with big equipment handling it, different things like that. And you have some of your longest cuts on this. Okay. But again, these forges are not necessarily as concerned about the quality of cut as more of the time of the cut. Okay. So if they have a bad quality cut, but they get their weight, they get what they need to put in the oven, they don't necessarily care. Okay. But these, like I said, are some of the longest cuts are going to be on the forges. Testing labs. These are places, I've got places that cut rock, which is not common in what I've dealt with, but I have a few of those customers that cut rock. And then a lot of these places, like a forge, they're going to have a testing lab and they're going to cut the material down and they're going to check different sections of the material. So these are usually 3 to 5 saws, and they're just going to always be cutting little slivers. And they usually have verticals, which we'll go over into verticals and horizontals in another video so that you understand that. But on testing labs, it's a lot of small cuts. They know exactly what they got to do. They usually have to mark everything out. There's a lot of documentation. Because they're verticals, they're usually relatively dirty on the bottom half. You're gonna have a lot of stuff on the bottom half of the saw, but that's just one of those things. But they know exactly what they got to cut, and so you know, they take a piece and they might have 12 cuts to get these 3 pieces out of it. Then they're gonna go destroy them or test them or mic them or whatever and do that kind of stuff. And then the last one that I have listed is gonna be your mills. This is where the material is made. Okay, these are your steel mills. They will make a continuous piece of material and then they will cut it in different ways. And sometimes they will use a bandsaw. I believe they usually use large cold saws when it's really hot in the certain areas. You can also see it. If you ever look at like the end of tubing or I-beams, you'll see a really big slag piece on the end. You know, a lot of times they cut it when it's still pretty hot, but there are times where they will cut it with a bandsaw. Those ones there, those machines are usually pretty rough because they're very production heavy. Anything that doesn't happen on the bandsaw, what's going to happen is it's holding up the whole line, and it's in a literal line, like a whatever you call it, you know, like a conveyor system. So basically, if this material doesn't get cut, next stuff can't come off, and so that just holds everything up. So they usually press these machines really hard. Uh, Again, with the bandsaw, they're not necessarily cutting it as hot as some of the other places where they're cutting with maybe a torch or cold saw, and they're cutting it really fast and nasty just to try to get stuff chopped up. But the bandsaw will get a lot of abuse in those areas. But those are the major industries that I see where the bandsaws are. If you have one, I would be happy for you to comment below because I want to know other industries that you see that has metal cutting bandsaws. And I do know that I mentioned stone a little bit, and those are a different animal. Okay. So a lot of times the bandsaw, okay, is the workhorse. He is the underappreciated. Okay, a lot of times it is the first entry point for an employee. You might bring in a temporary, something like this, and a lot of times you'll put him on a bandsaw. Okay, and if he proves himself, he makes it his 90 days, 30 to 90 days. A lot of times they might get moved to a more important machine, or job in the factory or the shop. And so what we see is a lot of turnover. We have a lot of bandsaws where they do not know how to necessarily how to cut well. Nobody taught them because the guy that taught them didn't get taught well. So it's just one of those things. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is because it's the first step, it can affect a lot of other steps in your setup. So it's important that your saws are running well, that your guys are trained well, that they know how to cut, they know how to handle the material, handle the blades, what kind of coolant, all that kind of stuff is very important. If this was helpful, please hit like and subscribe. More bandsaw content is coming. Drop a comment. What type of saw are you running? What kind of shop you're in, as well as what kind of material you're cutting. If you're in the Gulf Coast region and need your bandsaw service, please give us a call or shoot us an email. I Machine Services in Houston, Texas. We travel where you need us. Links are below. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.